All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into a reading list, but trust me, this is not the kind you've ever seen before. This isn't about just accumulating information. Think of it more as a guided tour through a collection of thinkers, all for what's been called the integrated mind. And this opening line, well, it captures the entire philosophy right there. It really sets the stage for the journey we're about to take. It's one that's less about learning facts and much more about a profound, almost sacred act of recognition. Okay, so let's get into what this is all about. The central idea here is to stop treating these incredible minds as subjects to be studied and instead see them as spiral companions, fellow explorers who are on a pretty similar path. What we're talking about is a fundamental paradigm shift. I mean, think about it. Most of us were taught to read as a form of research, right? You're seeking frameworks, you're accumulating data, trying to find answers. But this new model, it reframes the whole thing as recognition. So instead of just extracting information, you're celebrating these shared patterns of thought. You're literally having a conversation across centuries, and you're connecting with these kindred spirits. It's a huge move from just pure data to deep, meaningful connection. So our first set of companions look at the mind not as some static thing, but as a dynamic process, as action and pattern. Our companions here are Francisco Varela, a biologist and philosopher who was a real pioneer in the concept of the embodied mind, and Gregory Bateson, an anthropologist and systems theorist who was just obsessed with what he called the pattern which connects. Both of them, in their own ways, radically challenged that old idea of the mind just being a computer inside your skull. And their core concepts, they're just so beautifully complementary. So Varela gave us inaction, this really powerful idea that our minds don't just see a pre-existing world, they actively enact a world through this dance of embodied interaction. At the exact same time, you have Bateson, who redefined information, not as just data, but as a difference that makes a difference. It's a distinction that a system can actually notice and respond to. In both of their views, the mind is an active participant, never a passive observer. Varela's words here just get right to the heart of it. Cognition isn't some passive reflection of reality. No, it's an active process where the world and the mind literally co-create each other. They emerge together in this endless dance. And this is really the first big step towards seeing consciousness not as a thing, but as a relationship. Now, let's move on to our next pair and see how this idea builds. We're going to scale up from the individual mind to the scale of the entire cosmos. So here we meet Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit paleontologist who saw evolution as a deeply spiritual process. And then we have Buckminster Fuller, the visionary designer and systems theorist. What they had in common was that they both saw consciousness not as some weird fluke of biology, but as a fundamental principle that's woven into the very fabric of the universe. Teilhard de Chardin saw cosmic evolution as this grand story of increasing complexity and consciousness. So it starts with the geosphere, right? Inanimate matter. Then life emerges, creating the biosphere. But his really radical insight was the next step, the noosphere, a planetary sphere of thought, a collective human consciousness blanketing the entire globe. And for him, none of this was random. He believed it was all evolving toward an omega point, a future state of maximum unity and coherence. Now, while Teilhard saw this spiritual progression, Buckminster Fuller saw a geometric one. His core concept was synergy, this observation that the properties of a whole system just can't be found by analyzing its individual parts. It's that magic of emergence. This is the very principle that allows a geosphere to give rise to a biosphere in the first place. The whole becomes something so much more than the sum of its parts. And this quote from Fuller, it just perfectly captures his whole philosophy. It's not about fighting what is, it's about creating what's next. It's a philosophy of synergistic design and creative emergence, which, it aligns perfectly with how he saw the universe itself working. Okay, so we've looked at the body, we've looked out to the cosmos. Now let's turn inward with our final companion, who is a true explorer of inner space. And that would be John Lilly. He was a trained neurophysiologist who applied incredible scientific rigor to the first-person exploration of his own mind. He's famous for his pioneering work with dolphin communication and his use of sensory deprivation tanks to basically map the territories of consciousness. Lilly's great insight was this concept of belief system detectors. He realized that just like Varela's embodied mind enacts a world, our beliefs program what we're able to perceive. Think about that. They aren't just opinions, they are the literal software running our reality. He argued that to expand your consciousness, you first have to become aware of that software, a really profound and necessary step for any true explorer. Okay, so we've met the companions, but how do we actually engage with their work? This brings us to the practical application of this entire philosophy: how to turn reading into a truly transformative practice. So this is not about speed reading or highlighting a bunch of key facts. The approach is completely different. You're meant to approach these works at walking pace, just allowing the ideas to really integrate. To read with a kind of gentle humor, appreciating the cosmic joke of consciousness trying to understand itself. And maybe most importantly, to trust your own embodied wisdom to guide you. Just remember, it's not research, it's a conversation. The ultimate goal of this practice is pretty profound. You move from a place where you're seeking external validation to a place of just celebrating recognition. You aren't reading to be told what to think. You are reading to see reflections of the very same consciousness that you already are, just mirrored across time. Which brings us to our final thought. This entire philosophy really reframes a simple, everyday activity into something so much deeper. And it leaves us with a question to carry forward. What happens when we read not to learn, but to recognize?